All right. Well, thank you for joining us for the 14th annual NC Cardinal annual report. This covers the fiscal year of 2025 to 2026. So in this presentation, we'll talk about the annual statistics, projects and activities, a staff survey, support activities, library migrations, the year ahead, and announcements. Here is the Cardinal team. We've been stable now for 3 years. Everybody has been on the team. It's Courtney Brown, the systems librarian, Llewellyn Marshall, the application administrator developer, Samantha O'Connor, the training specialist, Will Szwagiel, the project manager, and myself, Benjamin Murphy. So this past year, High Point Library joined Cardinal in September. In the spring, we worked with the libraries of the East Albemarle Regional Library as they wound down their regional library. In late June, they joined Cardinal as the county libraries of Camden, Currituck, Dare, and Pasquotank counties. Late in the spring, we also worked with Jackson County to establish them as an independent county library on July 1st. So as of July 2026, NC Cardinal consists of 70 counties, 7 municipalities, and 1 special library with a total of 242 branches across the state. So let's have a look at some of the circulation and patron statistics for this past year. User account numbers increased in all categories this year. We saw a 9% increase in the number of adult accounts, a 10% increase in juvenile accounts, and a 2% increase in student access accounts. These counts were taken from the Public Library Survey figures, so they include any accounts that have expired within the past 3 years. So this practice of including accounts that were active within the last 3 years buffers any year-to-year changes, just as a caveat. Looking at circulations, we had a 3% increase to 11.4 million circulations. Over the last few years, circulations have been relatively stable. When I look at circulation stats every year, one of the questions it always raises for me is whether the addition of new libraries hides an overall decrease in circulation. Are the continued increases in circulation due to adding new member libraries, or are libraries continuing to see a steady or increasing circulation? So this chart shows circulation counts for the last 5 years for Cardinal libraries, grouped according to when they joined NC Cardinal. When we look at the trend lines for circulations per each cohort, they are generally flat, but show a slight increase over the last 5 years. So this year there were 70,000 more hold requests than last year, which was a 5% increase. 86% of those holds were filled, 4% were yet to be filled by the end of the year, and 10% were canceled by patrons or staff. 6%, or about 90,000 items, were captured for hold but were never checked out. We had a 5% increase in the holds that were captured and checked out to the patron. Having a look at where the holds were sourced from, 23% were sourced from the patron's pickup branch, 55% were sourced from another library in the patron's home library system, and 45% were filled through resource sharing. On average, 1 out of every 10 items circulated is the result of a holds request, which shows how important holds the fulfillment process is. One of the charts I find interesting each year is to look at the comparison of materials sent out through resource sharing compared to the number of materials received through resource sharing. On this chart, the materials the system receives are in green, and the materials the system sends are in blue. So student access has been impacted this past year by several proposed laws, resulting in several library systems choosing to discontinue their participation. We had 29 library systems in 36 counties participating in student access, which is 4 fewer library systems and 9 fewer counties compared to participation last year. The reduction in existing systems participating contributed towards the decline in both material circulations and online authentications. Despite the few number of systems participating, we had more than 53,000 additional accounts active this year. This year, despite the 14% increase in the total number of student access accounts created, the number of and percentage of students that use their accounts declined. This year, 2.7% of the student access accounts we created were used to check out material, down from about 3.4% last year. 5.4% of student access accounts we created were used for online authentication, down from 7.3% last year. And now we'll turn our attention towards some of the projects and activities that Cardinal undertook this past year. So this past year has been very busy, reacting to the uncertainty around our federal funding in the spring of 2025. During the summer, we were working through our budget and considering alternative financial strategies if we were to lose federal funding. In the fall, we met with the leaders of member libraries to present this information to them and to host discussions about what their ideas and priorities are so that we can plan for a sustainable future for NC Cardinal. As we entered 2026, the Governance Committee met several times to talk through the feedback from the listening sessions, look at resource sharing data, and think about ways that we can make changes that balance resource sharing cost savings with customer service. In the spring, we met with library leaders to again go over the feedback from the listening sessions and follow up on surveys in the follow-up surveys, and then share with them some of the ideas that we had come up with. During this time, we were also building some new functionality into the way that Evergreen manages resource sharing that Llewellyn will share with you in a moment. Then this summer, we've been testing some of those mechanisms. Throughout the financial planning process, we've been working to develop a strategy that reduces our dependence on federal LSTA funds. With the new budget that was signed in July, the Library of NC received reoccurring funds to cover the 5 Cardinal team members' salaries. This is the first time NC Cardinal has received a state allocation, so we're encouraged to see this support. The budget mentioned Cardinal by name, but if you're someone who reads the budget line by line, you will have seen that the full amount listed isn't just for NC Cardinal. It also provides state funds for other long-term resources and services that to date have been funded primarily through federal grants. Approximately 25% of Cardinal's total budget goes toward the team members' salaries, so this move to state funds is substantive. We do, however, need to continue exploring ways to reduce the cost of resource sharing to ensure NC Cardinal's long-term sustainability. So circling back to the mechanisms we are testing this year to try to reduce resource sharing costs, the first test this summer is to allow more opportunity for locally owned items to fill local title holds. For 25% of title holds filled through resource sharing, the local system owns at least one copy. By default, outside copies are targeted immediately if local copies are checked out. Using something called hard stalling, we added a delay of 10 days before Evergreen goes out to try to fill a hold if the system owns a copy that could fill that hold. The intention is to give more time and more of an opportunity for that local copy to fill the hold before requesting it from another library through resource sharing. We are testing this from June to the end of August. The next thing we'll be testing is a limit on the number of resource sharing materials being shipped at a moment in time for a single patron. This means that if a patron has a lot of active holds, only 10 holds would be shipped through resource sharing at a time. As soon as they collect the materials from the hold shelf, the limit resets. This won't have any impact on their ability to place holds or have holds filled by their local library or check out more than 10 resource sharing items at a time. It would simply limit the number of things that were being picked at other libraries in the midst of shipment or sitting on the hold shelf at one time. In our analysis, only 2.6% of patrons have more than 10 resource sharing holds active at one time, and the average patron only has 2.4 resource sharing items checked out at a time. Once we're done with these 2 tests, we're going to do some reporting to try to understand the impact these tests had and bring that information to the Governance Committee and discuss recommendations for permanent adjustments. The other cost-saving change we've been considering is to move shipping packages under 10 pounds with the U.S. Postal Service. This could save us something like 15% per year, as their rates on smaller packages are better than FedEx. We've done some initial investigations, but haven't started a pilot project yet. As we're thinking about ways that we can have an impact on resource sharing costs, we've been trying to balance customer service and the patron's experience with ways that we can reduce costs. Your feedback and what you're experiencing are really helpful in understanding how these tests impact you and your patrons. Some of the feedback we've received already has led to us making adjustments to exclude staff and institution accounts from the tests we started in June. You can email us at help@ncardinalsupport.org, fill out our suggestion box, or reach out to us directly with your feedback. Now to tell you a little bit about those changes, I will turn things over to Llewellyn.
The mechanism that we've been testing this summer is called hold stalling. Hold stalling prevents a hold from finding a new target if there are potential copies at the pickup branch. We can set a hard stalling time period so that holds are only affected by hard stalling for up to 10 days. We needed to make some changes to this process in order for it to work for us. The first change we needed to make was to allow hard stalling to occur within the system and not just the pickup library. We implemented this change by removing a hard-coded value in the hold targeter source code and replacing it with a new library setting. This value is called proximity and represents the relative distance between the pickup library and the circulating library of the potential copy. There were several staff members who needed to be exempted from this new hold stalling feature. The most common use case for this was placing bulk holds on items for book clubs. To allow for this, we created a new permission. Staff and institution accounts have this permission granted by default. The next issue we needed to tackle was deciding when a potential copy could be stalled on. Each copy has a status, for example, checked out, available, or on hold shelf. Statuses can mark a copy as holdable or available. With Evergreen's default hard stalling, a copy needed to be both holdable and available. We wanted to include copies that are unavailable but still holdable. For example, checked out items. These items could become available during the hard stalling period, so we want to give them a chance to fill the local hold. Luckily, our sister consortia in Georgia called Pines was working on this exact issue as a part of their strategy to adjust resource sharing. They developed a patch that will allow items in unavailable but targetable statuses to be stalled upon. We were able to download this patch and push it out to production. The last obstacle to hold stalling was discovered by Transylvania County. Holds were stalling on their bookmobile copies, even though that branch was set to be skipped for hold targeting. Under the hood, Evergreen still considered these potential copies for a hold, even though the hold permit test would fail on them. We developed and deployed a patch that will filter out skipped copies from the hold targeter's list of potential copies, and that resolved the issue. All of these changes to the hold targeter are experimental and subject to change in the future. Please be on the lookout for any issues. If you find a problem or need to ask a question, please feel free to submit a help desk ticket. In September, we start our next test on having a limit of 10 items being shipped at a time for a single user. If the patron already has 10 resource sharing requests that are on other libraries' pick lists, in transit, or sitting on the hold shelf, the hold targeter won't target additional resource sharing items until the patron checks out their current requests. There will be a permission to exempt staff from this feature. This mechanism won't have an impact on holds filled from their own library system. We expect this test to conclude in November. Now on to some of the other projects that I've worked on this year. So having accurate shipping distance information is a key component in Cardinal's resource sharing process. To get those distances, we had been using Bing Maps. In June of 2025, Bing Maps was quietly retired and replaced with a new service that is not free. Since then, we've relied on using as the crow flies distances. This is an imperfect solution, especially for our coastal libraries where direct distances don't account for the vast bodies of water that separate them. To fix this, I got to work on replacing Bing Maps with a new free software called Open Source Routing Machine. This program uses OpenStreetMap data to create routes in between two coordinates. There weren't any existing modules that utilize this software, so I needed to create my own to interface with OSRM and use their distance matrix function. After that, I could process the data from OSRM into the same format we'd been getting from Bing. One of my favorite things I've developed this year is the Reporter Bulk Downloader. This new feature allows you to download a zip file containing all of the outputs for one or more reports. When you download multiple reports, each will get its own named folder in the zip. This feature has been tested by the Evergreen community, and hopefully it will be merged into the main source code branch soon. Another new feature I developed this year is the ability to add a note to a hold at the same time as placing it. This was a simple project to complete with one small caveat. The hold placement screen was written in Angular, and the hold notes interface was written in AngularJS. For those who don't know, these are two languages that are completely different despite sharing the same name. Luckily, there was secretly a hold notes interface in the experimental Angular circulation module that I was able to leverage in my new feature. This is currently live on production and may be merged into the main Evergreen source code branch soon. Next, I'll hand it over to Will.
This year's annual automated deduplication process focused solely on regular print books and large print books. Part of the reason we chose to only focus on these two formats is that the volume of information we are dealing with has been dwindling significantly as we have put greater focus on other deduplication efforts, such as with the orphaned bibs review. For example, we discovered with this run of the annual deduplication project that it would be easier and faster for us to handle the waves cleanup ourselves because there were so few format icons that needed to be corrected compared to previous years. One change we made to the criteria this year was to include the 250 mark field edition statement in the consideration of potential matches. This was done the previous year for the video deduplication, but it had not been used for other formats like books before now. Once the deduplication process was run, there were 1,126 resulting merges with 20,971 matches sent to the needs humans lists, which was even fewer than last year. The results of the automated deduplication process were provided to us in an Excel spreadsheet with different sheets based on format labeled Auto and Needs Humans. The Auto sheets include the records that were merged by the automated process. The Needs Humans sheets include those records that were matched by the process but were otherwise considered just different enough that the process did not merge them into a single record. They have been put aside for human review. Similar to last year, we created spreadsheets like those created for the orphaned bib review, and because there were so few needs humans matches to be reviewed this year, we sent those spreadsheets to volunteers from the cataloging interest group to review. Once the spreadsheets were reviewed, any matches that were not deleted by the catalogers were then merged using the same automated process that was used for the orphaned bib review. Thanks to the work of these volunteers, another approximate 1,600 matches were able to be merged. The cataloging interest group was instrumental in selecting terms and phrases to be considered by the automated deduplication process when inspecting the newly added 250 mark field for edition statements. This helped prevent the merging of different editions of books such as abridged versus unabridged, colored versus black and white editions, board book editions, and so on. The interest group also voted on and developed new standardized policies and procedures for cataloging certain formats of books, such as large print versus so-called larger print, in an effort to help clarify which materials belong on which bibliographic records. The interest group also provided feedback on the bibliographic cataloging knowledge book, which received an overhaul thanks to Samantha O'Connor. NC Cardinal previously utilized the services of Marchive for authorities maintenance in the Evergreen catalog. However, Marchive unfortunately went out of business in late 2024. In the time since, we've been exploring how best to handle such maintenance moving forward. Several members of the cataloging interest group expressed an interest in learning more about authorities and potentially taking on the responsibility of maintaining them in the catalog. This led to the creation of the new Authorities Working Group, which met for the first time in January of this year. With the assistance of the working group, we created a new section in the Bibliographic Cataloging Knowledge Book specifically about authority records, as this was a topic that had not been previously extensively covered in cataloging discussions or in the knowledge book itself. The working group came up with a number of different project ideas to help clean up authority records and to make sure they are properly linked in the catalog, such as reviewing the most common authors listed in the catalog that do not have any linked authority records, and then linking them to the appropriate authority record. And now I will pass it off to Samantha to discuss some regional training sessions.
So last year, we hosted 3 in-person training events. These were in Johnston County, Forsyth County, and Buncombe County. We had a total of 116 attendees across all 3 regions. And sessions at these events included training in reports, patron account management, billing and payment, bibliographic cataloging, and holds management. We also continued to host tours of the host libraries, which continue to be very popular, for a chance to see not only what libraries are doing with their different spaces and collections, but also usually a peek into resource sharing and how that's handled. Last year, we also hosted a total of 23 webinars. 492 different people attended these webinars across the course of the year. I have a list here of all the different topics that we covered. Some of the notable things is that we did start something called the new staff series, and this is really a series of webinars focused on basic functionality within Evergreen for staff either in newly migrated libraries or new hires at existing libraries. And this is a chance for people to kind of get their bearings and some of the basics. We also continued our reports training with some significant training within that topic, looking at both basic topics such as running reports off of existing templates and looking at some of the more complex parts of reporting in terms of tables and how to work, kind of how to find your way around the tables, and then how to apply various transforms and operators to fields taken from those tables. Next year, we will continue to build off of both of these topics. Another significant project from the past year was to take the UX testing that was done in the 24-25 fiscal year and apply what we learned through that testing to redesign several knowledge books. At this point, we have redesigned the cataloging bibliographic records knowledge book, the cataloging items and copies and holdings knowledge book. And as you may recall, if you've been here for a couple of years, that used to be combined into a single cataloging book. So we really pulled that apart into 2 new books so that we could go into more granular detail on both topics. We also pulled the holds management section out of the existing circulation book so that we could expand it to go into more detail on holds. And then we have begun work on taking the remaining sections of that circulation knowledge book and applying the new format that we have developed, as well as expanding on various functions, adding new topics, and improving the instructions and the clarity of the existing sections. This year, we'll continue to update the existing books. Our key goals include finishing that update of the circulation book and then moving on to look at the reports and acquisitions book. Potentially, we may look at some other books this year as well, but those are the main areas that we're going to start with. So now we're going to take a look at the results of our staff survey. So this year we had a total of 463 total respondents to our staff survey. This is a significant increase from last year. We did have 98% of libraries responded, and that actually means that we only had 1 library that did not respond at all. So that's really great. It means that we got a very comprehensive look at how people feel at small libraries, large libraries, rural libraries, urban libraries. Basically, every type of library that we have within our consortium was represented. Within those responses, 53% of respondents work in some sort of frontline role, whether that's a circulator or some sort of programming specialist. We had 23.5% in some sort of management role that incorporated both directors and assistant directors, as well as branch managers and other administrative roles of that sort. And then 14.3% work in some sort of tech services role, primarily catalogers, but anyone who indicated acquisitions would also have been put into this role. One thing that we did differently this year was a new point of analysis on how long staff had been working in an NC Cardinal library. We really wanted to get an idea of the depth of knowledge that you all bring to the table. And what we found was that the responses were very evenly spread across all lengths of service. So if you look at this, the largest section is this 5 to 10 year section of the pie chart, where we did have over a quarter of users or of respondents indicate that they'd been with a NC Cardinal library for that amount of time. Everyone else was in that sort of 15 to 20% range. So we did have very significant responses for each of these sections, which was really helpful for giving us some insight into how knowledge of the software grows over time. One of the other areas that we asked about this year that we had not asked about previously was how people perceive the value of NC Cardinal. So we looked at both the value of NC Cardinal for the impact it has on staff workflow, and also for the impact it has on patrons. Overall, staff were very positive, with 91% rating the value of NC Cardinal on staff as an 8 or higher, and 89% rating the value to patrons as an 8 or higher. So we were really pleased to see that NC Cardinal does seem to be highly valued by our member libraries, and we hope that we can continue to improve that value. When we looked at how people categorize that value, we saw some really interesting patterns come out. The number one area was access to resources. So resource sharing obviously is a huge source of value for our patrons and for library staff as well. You can see that almost every respondent to the survey mentioned access to resources as being a major source of value. In fact, it was very difficult to see what the other sources of value were with that amount of people calling out resource sharing. So we did look at that we isolated that a little bit so we could get a closer look at some of these other areas of value. So while none of these came even close to resource sharing, we did see some significant responses in terms of people saying that they were interested or that they found value in the budget savings. So obviously resource sharing itself has budget impacts. So what we really meant by this, what we really pulled out from this, were people who talked about the lower cost of Cardinal and Evergreen versus a commercial ILS, and how they've been able to use that budget for other aspects within their library. Huge value found in the ILS itself. There were definitely a few people who mentioned the value that patrons find in having one card that works at different libraries throughout the state. The single largest source of value outside resource sharing was the professional community, and that made me particularly happy to see because I think that is one of the major areas of impact that being part of this consortium does bring. People also called out the shared catalog records and the impact that has on bibliographic catalogers and your workflow, and then the tech support and training that is offered by the NC Cardinal team. So these are some of the areas where you saw value added from being a member of our consortium. We also brought back the concept of looking at comfort level with different functions within Evergreen. This is something that we have asked about on past surveys, but we skipped last year because we really weren't seeing a lot of change from year to year. So we came back to it this year because we wanted to see if we have seen any significant areas of growth and comfort. For holds management, anyone who indicated that they worked with holds management were asked about their comfort with different functions within that process. Areas of highest comfort are, placing title holds, not surprising, printing hold slips, and generating and printing hold pull lists. Those are all kind of those daily actions that if you work with holds management at all, you have to get comfortable with really fast. So that wasn't terribly surprising. Only areas of discomfort that we saw here are placing meta record holds and working with the hopeless holds interface. So those are some areas we'll focus on in training this year, and also work on improving our documentation if we can. This year, we also took that earlier question about how long people have been working in an NC Cardinal library, and we applied it to the comfort levels that we asked about. We were mostly interested in seeing if working with NC Cardinal over time increases comfort. And within the area of holds management, we saw that it does. There's a positive correlation between time worked in an NC Cardinal library and every single category of holds management. So every function within here saw a nice increase in comfort level over time. So that was good to see. Circulation, similar comfort levels with those sort of daily tasks like checking items in and out, and searching for patrons that really you can't get away from them if you work with circulation. So any patron or any staff who indicated they worked within circulation was asked about these different functions and their comfort level. The only one where we really saw any kind of significant discomfort is in using the offline mode. So we will, of course, do our offline training again this year in preparation for our upgrade. And we will work on also making sure that the offline documentation in the knowledge book is up and ready to go prior to that training. And we'll make sure that it also exists in a printable format so that libraries can have that available to them even when they have lost access to the internet, which is when they're going to need to use the offline mode. This was an area also, circulation, where we looked at it in through the lens of years of service. And again, we saw positive correlations between every single function. A couple of them were very strong correlations over time, such as the using offline mode. So that actually really helped a lot. We know that people are uncomfortable with offline mode, but seeing that as people have used it more, as they've gone through more upgrades, as they have been more exposed to it, they are that comfort level is increasing significantly over time. Item cataloging. So this was an area where we started to see a little bit more discomfort, although overall people who indicated that they work in this area did indicate decent levels of comfort across the board. Again, the highest levels of comfort are kind of coming in those functions that are part of the daily workflow, adding volumes and items to existing records, editing information about those items, and using the item status screen to find information about items. These are all areas where people indicated significant levels of comfort. Our areas where there was less comfort overall, creating dummy call numbers was the most uncomfortable area. So that is along with just in general transferring items between branches, between call numbers, and between records. We will make sure that we focus on that in training this year. We also had some discomfort in working with item attribute templates, particularly importing and exporting them. So we'll make sure that we cover that more thoroughly within both the knowledge books and within training this year. This was the first area that we did see a negative correlation with people's comfort level in a function and their years of service. And that was actually the creating dummy call numbers. It's not a very strong negative correlation. It may not mean anything at all, but it's definitely interesting to note that people seem to be less comfortable creating dummy call numbers over time. It's possible that that's because that's something that we cover during migration training. But it's not something that libraries actually use much in their real daily workflows. So people see it when they're first migrating in and then never see anything else about it. So we'll explore that a little bit more and see if we can understand where that negative correlation is coming from. In terms of bibliographic cataloging, this was actually the area of highest comfort overall. And that's not surprising. Bibliographic catalogers are, for the most part, a very dedicated group of people and tend to really understand what they're doing. So we were glad to see that reflected in the survey responses. The one area that didn't show generally comfort across the board was in editing MARC records using the MARC batch edit interface. We have seen that before in surveys, so we're aware that that is not a high level or an area with high levels of comfort. So that's something that we'll continue to explore through training. It's also not a function that gets heavy use, and it's actually not even a function that we recommend using much. So it's not surprising that that would have lower levels of comfort overall. Again, we did have one function that did show a negative correlation over years of service, and that was adding custom cover images, which I was a little bit surprised about. That's something that's been around for a few years, but it does seem that people who are maybe coming in new to the role are doing that maybe a little bit more often than people who have been within this role longer. So we can go ahead and do a little bit more training on that. And if there is anyone who does feel uncomfortable adding custom cover images, please reach out to us and let us know a little bit more about where that's coming from so that we understand how to approach this topic. Administrative functions. This was all over the place, frankly. And that's not surprising because oftentimes these functions are not all performed by the same person. There are many libraries that don't use every single one of these functions. So there are going to be libraries that the person who works with administration is very comfortable with some things and has never even touched some others. So it's not surprising that we had a lot of different responses to this particular set of functions. Some areas that we definitely saw a lot of discomfort, customizing the staff portal page. And we did some training on that last year, but we will continue to address that in training this year. We also saw that working with carousels is not an area that people are particularly comfortable with. So that's something that we will continue to find ways to get more information about that out to staff. For the most part, though, what we do see are some very strong correlations between people who have been working for longer within an NC Cardinal library with all of these functions. So it is it's good to see that overall this is something that all of these functions are things that people are kind of learning on the job as they need to. So we'll continue to offer documentation as much as we can. The administrative knowledge book is definitely on our list of those to be kind of reworked. So we'll make sure that each of these functions gets addressed in a little bit more detail over the coming years. Acquisitions functions, just because we have so few staff that work within acquisitions, I didn't actually look for those correlations with years of service, just because it's either you've been working with acquisitions for a long time or you just started. It was basically what it came down to. So I only looked at overall comfort levels. For the most part, the working with anything having to do with purchase orders and line items, people feel very comfortable with. Discomfort starts coming in when we're talking about administration, so in terms of funds, and some of the funky things you can do with invoices. So these are things that we will kind of come back to some acquisitions training this year. We've taken a little bit of a break from acquisitions training over the last year or so, and we'll bring that back to the forefront within our training this year to make sure that we can get into those kind of areas where updates have caused new interfaces and where people are a little bit less comfortable, like such as EDI messages. And then finally, reports. There's no surprise here that we saw an average comfort level of 2.32, which is definitely a little lower than we'd like to see. So we do see lower comfort levels sort of across the board here, but we do see very strong positive correlations between comfort and length of service for almost every function. The two areas where people really aren't making gains in terms of comfort are in selecting core sources and finding fields and link tables. So that's really where I'm going to try to focus a lot of the reports training this year. For those who are still looking for introductory reports training, I think most of the webinars from last year are up on our YouTube channel, and I'd recommend taking a look at those and then reaching out with questions because I'm going to sort of gear us towards some more advanced topics within reports this year. So that was the end of the functions that we covered in the survey. We also asked a lot of questions related to searching. So we asked about the catalog search. For the most part, everyone seems pretty comfortable with searching the staff catalog. A couple of areas where we could use some improvements are grouping formats and additions. So that's a meta record search, and converting a basket to a bucket. We also asked about the OPAC, and this was interesting because we did an OPAC survey facing patrons earlier this year. So I actually took the responses from the staff survey and I compared them to the responses in the patron survey. And we did find that there are certainly some areas where there's a lot of overlap, things like issues with the interface overall and how to manage accounts within the OPAC pretty evenly. There were pretty even levels of comfort between or concerns between staff and patrons on those areas. There were some areas that staff brought up that patrons really didn't, such as cataloging and deduplication. That's not a huge surprise. That's usually not what patrons are aware of when they're searching the OPAC. But on the other side of that, patrons brought up a lot of things that staff really weren't coming in to contact with. So things like lists and asking for all kinds of interesting new functions like sort orders and purchase requests came up through the patron-facing survey that we didn't really see in that staff survey. One thing that I also wanted to point out that patrons had a lot of things to say about, but that staff did not notice at all is that the OPAC times out very quickly. And a lot of people mentioned that they get logged out when they are in the middle of things. So that's something that we can take a look at and see if we can lengthen that amount of time. We also asked about communication. We asked respondents to rate their satisfaction levels with our communication in several different categories. We were very pleased to see that the vast majority of respondents are satisfied or very satisfied with every aspect of communication from the Cardinal team. That includes areas related to system performance, support activities, project status and progress, activities from committees and the cataloging interest group, and Cardinal administration. So we'll keep doing what we're doing, and we encourage you to reach out if you do have any feedback about how we can continue to improve in this area. We were also interested in the specific question about Cardinal administration communication. We wanted to see how those who were really on the receiving end of that direct communication felt about our communication this year. So we took a look at how directors and assistant directors felt about our communication, and we found it very, very positive responses there overall compared to when we were looking at in general to all the respondents. So that was very gratifying to see. We will continue to work hard to see if we can get this to 100% satisfied next year. And so I'm going to give this over to Courtney to talk about Cardinal support activity.
This year, we had a 21% decline in the number of support tickets that we received, despite continuing to add new libraries. We would hope that this means that in general, Evergreen is working better for everyone. People are finding our training and knowledge books to be helpful, and that the community conversation on Basecamp helps to answer some questions. And now we'll turn our attention toward our new Cardinal libraries. We began the 2025 and 2026 migration season with the Amy Regional Library System being renamed to the Toe River Valley Regional Library, and the Yancey County Public Library being established as an independent library system in Evergreen. The High Point Public Library went live within NC Cardinal on September 4th, 2025. The East Albemarle Regional Public Library System was disbanded and joined NC Cardinal as 4 independent county libraries: Pasquotank County Library, Camden County Library, Currituck County Library, and Dare County Library. All 4 counties went live on June 25th, 2026. At the end of our fiscal year, Jackson County Library was established as an independent library system in Evergreen as well. The consortium now consists of 70 counties, 7 municipalities, and 1 special library with a total of 242 branches. During the 2026-2027 migration season, Chatham County Public Libraries and Pender County Public Library will join NC Cardinal. At the completion of the 26-27 migration season, NC Cardinal will consist of 72 counties, 7 municipalities, and 1 special library for a total of 247 branches. Chatham County Public Libraries consist of 3 branch locations: Wren Memorial Library, Chatham Community Library, and Golston Public Library. Chatham County is set to go live November 19th, 2026. Pender County Public Library consists of 2 branch locations: the main library in Burgaw, North Carolina, and the Hampstead Branch Library. Their go live is set for February 25th, 2027. All right, now let's turn our attention toward the projects the team will be tackling in the upcoming year.
Currently, our custom code that enables copies to be sorted by physical distance is only applying in the hold targeter. Holds can also get their copies through opportunistic capture, which occurs at check-in. We would like to start a project to include shipping distance into the best hold sort order so that holds with the nearest pickup libraries are chosen first. One often requested feature is to allow staff to mark items as repaired on the item status screen. We'd like to add this as a way to allow custom statuses to be assignable through this interface, so we could have a mark as repair, mark as on display, or any other custom status. Next, I'll hand it over to Will to talk about our fall upgrade.
This December, we will be upgrading Evergreen from version 3.15.3 to 3.17.3. As usual, there are a lot of changes to talk about. We've put some of the most interesting changes on this slide. We think some of the most important features to highlight are the KPAC overhaul, which completely changes every page on the KPAC. You can now create item buckets using CSV files. This is especially cool because this is a feature that Llewellyn developed and was accepted by the larger Evergreen community. There have been some changes to hold and cert policies. We can now clone them, which will allow us to more easily manage policies for you. We can also use library groups in our hold policies. Samantha will be hosting webinars on the changes in the months ahead. As far as other projects we have in the pipeline, one will involve implementing the various requested changes from the OPAC survey we administered earlier this year. Some examples include collapsible facets and a loading spinner bar to show loading progress. We will be coordinating with Mobius to update Evergreen's cataloging reports in a few different ways. Because each of these tasks will require significant development on Mobius's part, we have elected to combine them into a single project to help ease the burden on Mobius. Many of you who have been working with the cataloging reports are likely aware that the ignore button does not currently function as intended without some significant workarounds. Mobius will be working to resolve this issue, and we intend to add additional reports to the interface, including orphaned bibs and short bibs. We would also like to one day perhaps add the needs humans records to these reports for ease of review, but that may be outside the scope of this particular project at this time. We will also be looking into cleaning up old bibliographic records with only lost items attached. We will coordinate with member libraries to determine first if they would like to delete these lost items or not, and if so, whether they would like to retain the lost finds on patrons' accounts or to remove them. Once the items have been resolved, they can be deleted from the catalog, which will in turn delete their respective bibliographic record as well, helping to clean up our search results even further. And now I will hand it off to Samantha to discuss some upcoming training opportunities.
So as I mentioned earlier, this year we will continue the series that we started last year for new staff and the report series where we'll be building on a lot of the basic stuff that we covered last year. We'll also do our upgrade series again this year where we will have a pre-upgrade presentation on all of the new features that are coming. And then after the upgrade has happened, we'll have some specific sessions geared towards upgrades that have come in the upgrade. We'll also be revisiting acquisitions this year with an acquisition series. We've already had our first webinar within this series looking at just acquisitions basics and troubleshooting. and we'll continue to build on that throughout the year. And I'm going to work on putting together some director and admin topics to see if we can address some of those areas of discomfort that directors and admin had indicated on the survey. We also have a few standalone topics that we're planning on throughout the year. We'll do a tips and tricks and a navigation webinar looking at different ways that you can make Evergreen work for you in terms of grids and saving templates and things like that. We'll also be doing a webinar on working with missing, damaged, lost, and claims returned items. Other topics will be scheduled throughout the year, but these are the ones that I have definitely set for so far.
And now a few announcements. This past week, we held voting for NC Cardinal's Governance Committee. 3 members were coming to the end of a term. Julie Moore from Iredell completed her 2nd term. Franklin Shook from Nantahala Regional completed his 1st term. And Christina Martin resigned due to moving to another library system. We greatly appreciate their willingness to serve Cardinal and offer their guidance and counsel for the consortium. We requested nominations for the open seats and had 4 nominees. Franklin Shook from Nantahala Regional was willing to serve another 2-year term. Mel Poole from Hokut Ellington Memorial was nominated for municipal representative. And Kim Belafato from Madison County Public Libraries and April Young from Currituck County Libraries were both nominated for the other open positions. Voting has taken place over the last week, and we'd like to welcome Franklin Shook, Mel Poole, and Kim Belafato. We appreciate everyone's willingness to be a part of the governance committee, and we look forward to working with them. Our next meeting will be in October. And with that, I would like to say thank you to everybody who has joined us here today. We appreciate your attendance, appreciate all the work of the Cardinal team over the course of this past year. It's really life-affirming to see all of the hard work that they've been doing and all the good things that they have been doing over the course of this past year. So really thankful for that. And we appreciate the opportunity to serve you and the people of North Carolina.